Picture this, 2 million years ago. Fire has just been tamed and language is barely a thing yet and you've fallen for someone. Now what? You can't exactly slide into their DMs. All you've got is a well-knapped stone axe and a lot of hope. Pop culture has sold us the same image forever. A grunting caveman clubbing a woman over the head and dragging her by the hair back to his cave. It's been repeated so many times we just assumed it was true. But the reality is way more interesting and way less barbaric. So today we're actually asking, what did dating look like in the Stone Age? Who could you pair up with? Who couldn't you? And how did the group around you judge the whole thing? Part 1. Why the caveman? Dragging myth is wrong. Let's debunk this first. Anthropologists aren't even totally sure where this cliche came from. Probably 20th century cartoons. In reality, there wasn't really a caveman to begin with. Most early human groups were nomadic, living in open camps or temporary shelters rather than caves. So the whole dragged her back to his cave image is geographically wrong before we even get to the rest of it. There usually wasn't a cave to drag her to. More importantly, early human communities were small, usually just a handful of families, and survival that depended entirely on cooperation. In that kind of environment, forcibly grabbing a mate didn't just make an enemy of one woman, it made an enemy of her entire family, her entire allied group. In short, brute force was an evolutionarily bad strategy. The ones who survived were the ones who cooperated. Part 2. So how did they actually pair up? This is where it gets interesting. When scientists studied the genetics of skeletons from a site called Sunghir, dating back around 34,000 years, they found something surprising. These people were deliberately avoiding inbreeding. They weren't just pairing up within their own small group. They were reaching out to neighboring groups to find partners. The research suggests people deliberately sought partners beyond their immediate family, connected to a wider network of groups from within which mates were chosen. How did they pull this off? Probably through seasonal gatherings. Different groups would come together when hunting territories overlapped, or when a particular animal in migration brought everyone to the same place. These meetups look a lot like what we'd call a festival or a wedding ceremony today. Multiple groups gathering, sharing food, dancing, trading ornaments. And this was probably where young people actually noticed each other. The complexity and craftsmanship of the jewelry and objects buried with these remains suggests that rules, ceremonies, and rituals may have developed around the exchange of mates between groups, meaning this might be where the very first wedding ceremonies came from. Ornaments were functional too. They likely signaled which group you belonged to and who you could pair with. Basically a Stone Age dating profile. So the first bio section was probably the necklace around your neck. 22 hunter, seashell collector looking for something serious? Part 3. Once you paired up, then what? Here's where things get more complicated, because forming a lasting bond had its own logic. Women were spread thin across large territories and hard to come by, so once a man found one, a strong, protective instinct kicked in. Scientists call this mate guarding. Letting another man mate with your partner at the wrong moment could be extremely costly, since the human interbirth interval was very long. Up to 4 years, meaning one badly timed encounter could set back an entire reproductive opportunity. So loyalty back then was less of a romantic choice and more of a strategic necessity. But things shifted over time. As brains grew bigger and babies were born more helpless and dependent for longer, sticking together and raising offspring as a team started paying off. So loyalty started as jealousy, but eventually turned into a survival strategy for raising kids together. Not exactly a fairy tale. But let's be honest, real life usually isn't either. Part 4. What did the group have to say about it? So is anyone actually keeping tabs on all this? Absolutely. In small groups there was no such thing as privacy. Everyone was in everyone else's business, kind of like living in a tiny town today. Who you paired up with wasn't just your own decision. It affected the alliance between two groups, resource sharing, even defense. That's why many researchers think early marriage-like arrangements were often guided by elders or group leaders. A much older version of what we'd now call an arranged match. Personal attraction obviously mattered, but it wasn't a completely free choice either. The group cared a lot about who you bonded with because that person was about to become family. So yes, even in the earliest chapters of human history, there was already a version of, you can't decide without asking my family. They just didn't have a group chat for it, they had a campfire. So it turns out Stone Age dating life was nowhere near as crude and random as we imagined. There were people deliberately avoiding inbreeding, forming ties with other groups through seasonal gatherings, signaling who's available through ornaments, and running on the same bonding biology we still carry around today. So next time you complain that modern dating is too complicated, remember, our ancestors were already working through this thousands of years ago, before language was even fully formed, at seasonal camp gatherings with seashell necklaces. Maybe nothing's really changed, just the platform.